I did not kill him. I was not thinking about him, but now I know why. The first thing you asked me, you said, did you already know about me before now? And now I know why he was asking that.
Well, the main character is called Sal, and the first thing I would say, since this is Sing for Science, is you can call me Sal, which is a song by Paul Simon. You can call me Al.
Just 10 minutes ago, he was pushing to have the song pumped through the system. I explained that logistically it would have made things difficult. Okay, so there's no connection there, even though Sal is derisively referred to as the E.T. whisperer, right, by his critics.
That is true. But see, now I'm going to get in big trouble. But, that character wasn't really based on anybody I know, because I don't actually know any astrophysicists.
Now you do.
Now I do.
Yeah.
But see, now I can do something else in the next book now that I actually know him. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you've given me something to work on.
Yeah, I do not take it personally. That's okay.
And besides, they wouldn't drop you out of a UAP. They would like you too much to do that.
Well, I wouldn't mind being dropped as long as I know that we have a partner out there. That's once I know it, that's a good enough life as far as I'm concerned. My wife said that if they ever come to pick me up, I should make sure to leave the car keys with her and ask them not to ruin the loan when they lift off. But most recently, she got so upset by geopolitics that she says she will join me.
Okay.
Well, now that's the question I have. I mean, you hear these stories. So you're driving along because you like being out in places and being quiet. You were telling me how much you like nature. And then you're going to have this orb thing that's going to be over the road, and they're going to be wanting you to walk in that little beam of light. My question is, are you going to do it?
Sure, I will. There is a lot of room for improvement if you read the news every day. Human intelligence is not the pinnacle of creation. And remember the biblical story about Moses. He started believing in a superhuman entity that he called God after seeing a burning bush that was never consumed. And today, if you would have shown Moses, a cell phone or any technological gadget, he would have been much more impressed than a bush that is burning. And that shows that what we assign to superhuman intelligence may be just a more advanced form of science and technology. In fact, if you were to ask what is the job definition of God, if you were to advertise the job and allow people or allow entities to apply to the job of God, the answer is you should be able to create a universe. And we don't know what happened before the Big Bang, but if we had a theory that unifies quantum mechanics and gravity, we could have figured out what happened before the Big Bang, and then we would have a recipe. If you create those conditions in the laboratory, a baby universe will come out. So a civilization that has more than a century of modern science, what we have right now, might get to a point where they can create a baby universe in their laboratory, and they can apply for the job of God.
Now you know what he's doing when nobody's looking.
Now, I want to tease this out a little bit, because you talk about that at length in your new book. And so that, to me, it seems to focus on something where I think there's a through line between both of what you both do, and that is searching for the unknown unknown. As an investigator, as a writer, and then also coming up with theories. So, as I understand it, this idea of rating a civilization based on its capacity to create a universe, that is an extension of what concept?
Right. To me, it's not a matter of physical power, the way that alpha males think about the world. It's more about knowledge. And the highest level of sophistication is if you are able to recreate the conditions that you were born into. So we were born into this universe, and if we can create a new universe, then we really reached the highest level of that any civilization can reach. So that's my aspiration is to find a partner in our cosmic neighborhood that can inspire us to do better than we did so far. And I feel that the Messiah will not come from this earth. It may come from another star.
I hope so.
Yeah, because as of now, just singing John Lennon's words, imagine all the people living in peace, will not bring us anywhere. There are 2 wars going on, and our civilization may go down the drain if we continue to misbehave. There are lots of existential risks that face us. And perhaps what we need is a shock therapy to meet a neighbor that can inspire us to do better. Because in our private life, meeting a partner changes the meaning of our existence. And if you ask most of the people that practice cosmology, the study of the universe, they will tell you what Steven Weinberg said. He said that, the universe, the more we comprehend the universe, the more pointless it looks. But the reason it looks pointless to many physicists is because we think of it as a collection of particles. But if we find a partner, another intelligent civilization, it will change the meaning for our existence. It will not feel lonely anymore. We would have a partner that we can learn from. And so that's my hope. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Okay. And Patricia, I'm curious because when I first reached out to you, you knew about Avi's work. And so what to you is most compelling about what he's doing?
Well, I think that, first of all, it's very brave what you do because, when you start talking about UAPs or UFOs or these things, so oftentimes people go, oh, that's weird or whatever. And it's not at all weird. I've always wondered what's beyond us. And I grew up in a very religious environment. And of course, I had to memorize all these Bible verses and all these things. But I never felt like that was the answer to everything. I remember I was fascinated looking up at the sky. I remember doing that as a little kid. And I've always had a sense that there's something much bigger and greater than what we are. And I think the reason that's so important is that we need to think bigger. We need to aim higher. And we shouldn't be settling for behaviors that are really just not good. And I'm talking about whether it's people that you see on TV, like politicians, for example. We won't name names. Or it could be simply the way you see your neighbor treating other people. We should be thinking about how we can become more highly evolved.
Yeah, and on that I would say science is better than politics. And the reason for that is because there is an arbitrator in science, that's nature. And if you are humble enough to pay attention to nature and learn from evidence rather than figments of your imagination, most people have wishful thinking. We thought that we are at the center of the universe. That was very flattering to our ego. Now we think that we are at the intellectual center of the universe. There is nobody as smart as we are. If you were to ask Elon Musk, he would say, yeah, of course, we are probably alone. And I think this arrogance is unjustified, and therefore we should seek the evidence to figure out what nature tells us by observing the sky, by observing the oceans. The sky is not classified, the oceans are not classified, government is not a scientific organization. We should just explore it ourselves. And people often say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but then they are not seeking the evidence. And I say that extraordinary evidence requires extraordinary funding. You need to put a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money, and only then you will be able to discover things.
See, this to me is what I find to be the thickest through line which connects what you both do, because I think there's a modesty built into it. And I heard you say something once in an interview, Patricia, that I absolutely loved. You said that things like these words that we're afraid of, the supernatural, the paranormal, your last book included reference to Bigfoot, that these are just the unknown. You know what I mean? That sometimes that we shy away from them, and we develop a prejudice. And I've heard you speak similarly.
No, I think there is a common thread between spirituality and the frontiers of science, because in both cases, you need to be brave to figure out the unexpected. When I look for technological signatures of aliens, I don't imagine anything. People often ask me, will they be little green men or, so. I don't want to imagine, because nature, our imagination is based on our experience here on Earth, and it could be something far more fantastic. And probably Patricia can imagine much better than I can, because she's such an accomplished author. But to me, I'm just searching the things that are unfamiliar. We know about birds, we know about drones, we know about airplanes that humans produce, and I just want to see if there is anything unfamiliar in the sky. That's a simple detective story. The work of a scientist is like a detective. I very much sympathize with Kay.
Well, she does the same thing you do, but just in a very different way. Your life out there, she's death down here. Life up there, death down here. She likes your job better. But again, it's following evidence. It doesn't matter when she walks into a crime scene and she sees this and this, and maybe her instinct says, I don't trust that shifty-looking person over there. Look at, he looks very suspicious. But then again, that doesn't mean that person did anything. What you need to look at are their fingerprints, is their DNA, is there trace evidence? What can we then analyze in a laboratory that might help us piece together what really happened here? We were talking about this a little earlier, that back in the Victorian era, there were only two ways that you could find somebody guilty of a crime. One was eyewitness account. We know how dangerous that is. And the other is confession, which also is dangerous. And so we don't want to have that sort of intuitive or just biased approach to coming up with answers like this.
Yeah, and I should give credit to FIFA, the World Soccer Organization, because that's the way they operate now. If they want to figure out whether there was a goal that is being disputed, they don't go around and ask the players or the audience. They use cameras to figure out what happened. So, people are not reliable detectors. And you need material evidence, and that's the way detectives work. Yeah.
Well, we are very unreliable witnesses. I'm sure everybody in this room has had a situation where you look at something and you swear you're seeing one thing, and then you do a double take and realize it's not what you're seeing at all. And again, you've got to have a pragmatic approach. And for example, if you see some strange light in the sky that you think is a UAP, well, it may very well be, but that doesn't mean it's from non-human intelligence.
Right. I actually had a photographer at a wedding that took a lot of photos of the bride and groom, and then he said, I need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And I said, I'm not signing anything. Just give me the photo and I'll tell you what it is. And he said, no, it's really the best photo ever of a UAP, an unidentified anomalous phenomena. Eventually, he surrendered and sent me the photo. And when we looked at it, it was behind the groom, and it looked like just a napkin flying in the wind. And so, once again, I think it's the method of science that will educate us whether we are alone or not. And of course, the government may have at its possession interesting data and materials, because the US government spends nearly $900 million a year on military budgets, and that's 1/3 of the expenditure of around the world of $2.4 trillion. And obviously, if they monitor the earth and the sky all the time, they might see unusual things if they're out there. And but they're not interested in what lies outside the solar system. That's my day job. Their day job is national security, and they don't want to expose the data to the public because it may tell adversarial nations of the capabilities of the sensors that were used. And so I very much hope the US government, if they have something unusual, they would show it to scientists like myself. But it's not a matter of hearsay or eyewitness testimonies. We need to see the actual data. Yeah.
I would like to draw attention to, Patricia, your own impulse for investigation and how you prepare, which to me is quite scientific in nature. Being suspicious, asking questions, and I'm just amazed at the lengths that you go to. These are, if you would, and might be easier on your neck, Patricia, you can look that way, right there, there's a screen. Could you describe what we're looking at? Because I would like the audience to understand the amount of preparation that goes into your books.
That is, I am at the Body Farm in Knoxville, Tennessee. That's what you're seeing is what's left of a human body, somebody who donated their body to forensic science. And at the Body Farm, as it's called, it's really got a much longer name than that, but it's known as the Body Farm. The reason the forensic anthropologists are studying all that is to learn more about time of death, because in various conditions it can change, and that can be very important for someone's alibi, for example. So I've been to that place a lot, and that's the archaeological excavation at Jamestown.
Okay.
That's a skeleton that's probably been there since around the early 1600s. I'm not sure if that was the one I was working on that I called Granny, and she had a big abscess in her tooth, and I knew that she was crabby. I knew she was in a bad mood. Plus, she had a notch in her two front teeth from smoking a pipe. They had those ceramic pipes back in the day.
Yeah.
And so I said, she's got nicotine withdrawal, and she has a big tooth abscess. This was not a happy lady. And I'm going to tell you what, I had a bad time when I was working on that. I got damage to one of my ankles from kneeling in the dirt, and I stood up and I had nerve damage in it. I still have trouble with this ankle, and I call it Granny's Revenge.
Oh, okay.
She said, that's what you get for digging me up.
And then here, is this training with this one was with the Secret Service, right?
Yeah. Well, see, what happens is when I go to places like the Secret Service Training Center, which is where that was taken, they always want to put me on the gun range. I don't know why they think that. I'm really like, oh, do I have to do that? Because it's all that interactive stuff. So these criminals are coming out from around the corner, and they've got a hostage, and they're real actors, and I'm supposed to shoot at them with my little laser gun. I won't point at you, it's not polite. And of course, I just shoot everything. You don't want me out there. I said, well, he looks suspicious, kaboom. And so it's, but anyway, so they put me through that in one of those, that's what's going on right there.
Well, I think what I find most interesting when I read the Scarpetta series is your inclusion of the prosaic. And to me, I also see a connection to the importance of granularity in science. Like you'll just walk us through a scene, like when Kay puts on gloves, when Kay washes her hands, things like this. I think it's so important to the storytelling, but it also imparts something to the reader. And I'd be curious to know, because obviously, you have paved the way for our love of forensic entertainment, CSI, all these things, and now the Scarpetta series is being adapted. So I wonder, is there something that you would like readers to take from these books to develop their own investigative hunch, to ask questions, their own capacity for wonder, curiosity?
It's a very good question, because one could ask, why do I do this? If I'm trying to do something that I think is edifying. Now, when I studied literature in college, the first rule is never be didactic. You're not supposed to preach to people or we don't like to read things like that where the author's trying to tell us how to live our lives. And so I try to be very, very careful about not doing that, but I do have a point. I'm trying to show you a logical way, like if Scarpetta does this and this and this, well, why is she doing that? And I try to tell you without being too long a narrative, so that you understand the logic. Because if you learn the logic of some things, they'll help you be logical in other things. And the other thing is, I'm showing you really bad things that people do. And that was my big dilemma when I worked in the medical examiner's office after I'd been there a number of years. And I was writing books that nobody wanted. And finally, this editor said, "Is this what you see in the morgue every day, the stuff that you're writing about?" And I said, "No." I said, "It's not what I see at all." Because I had kind of like, buried treasure and people who cheated the will and all that kind of stuff. And she said, "Well, I want to see what you see." And I thought, how am I going to show this to people in a way that's not glorifying and even disrespecting what I'm seeing every day? Because it's not a murder mystery on that autopsy table. That's a person. That's somebody's loved one. I mean, it could be you. And so I had to make a decision. I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to show people what it's really like, and I'm going to show it through her eyes, through the medical examiner, the scientist, because her point of view is a humane one. And what she would tell you is, no, don't do that. Don't do that. We don't do that. We don't kill people. We don't abuse power, is what she would say. And anything that falls under that category, abuse of power, is really what I consider original sin.
Well, this is, I think your way of showing things and the reveal, it does awaken this instinct for curiosity, which I've heard you talk about as well. I think you quite modestly describe yourself as a curious farm boy. Is that right?
Well, I see the job of being a scientist as a great privilege to pursue your curiosity. And you might wonder, if you see people in academia, many of them try to pretend to be the adults in the room. And that's opposite to being curious. And, when the first object from outside the solar system was discovered in 2017, and we'll see a picture of it, a colleague of mine that worked on rocks in the solar system, this is an artist's depiction of that object, a colleague of mine said, this object that has a name Oumuamua because it was discovered by a telescope in Hawaii, and Oumuamua is a scout in the Hawaiian language. My colleague said, Oumuamua looks so weird, I wish it never existed. And to me, that is exactly the opposite attitude to a curiosity-driven science, where if nature delivers something anomalous to your doorstep, that's actually a gift, because then you realize that there is something you've been missing, and it's an opportunity to learn. So doing science is an opportunity to learn. It's a learning experience, and we can make mistakes along the way, but as long as we don't put our ego in front, we can enjoy the experience. But a lot of people that go to academia see science as a tool for demonstrating that they're smart. And that is exactly the opposite approach, because then you pretend to know things that you don't really know. And you dismiss anomalies because they violate your expertise. You want to pretend that you understand everything, just like the adults in the room. So when I meet with young students, I often tell them, never try to pretend to be the adult in the room. Always ask questions and try to figure out things. And most of the time we just don't have enough evidence to figure out. But therefore you should seek to find as much data as possible, just like a detective, because at the end, if you have enough data, you will figure out the truth.
What do both of you do? You've accumulated so much success, and you get to a certain point. How do you, it seems that wonder, maintaining a perspective of wonder and awe is almost a discipline. So how do you do that?
Well, it's very easy. You just stay a kid forever. You don't need to pretend. Mm-hmm. As long as you don't, I don't have any footprint on social media. And therefore, I don't care how many likes I get. For me, what matters the most is that I understand something fundamental about nature. And that's the reward. That's a good enough reward. If you really want honors, awards, if you want to impress other people, to get likes from people, then the way you operate is very different. You don't make mistakes. You try to avoid them as much as possible. And you don't make major discoveries, because you must take risks if you're willing to explore the unknown. You know, you must take. Einstein was wrong 3 times between 1935 and 1940. He argued that black holes do not exist, gravitational waves do not exist, and quantum mechanics doesn't have spooky action at a distance. And all 3 discoveries were given the Nobel Prize over the past decade for gravitational waves, for the discovery of black holes, for quantum entanglement. So it just shows you, Einstein wanted to figure out something about nature, and he was wrong. I mean, we all make mistakes, but at the end, it's a learning experience.
And you take issue with, I mean, not quantum entanglement, but some of these other ideas like parallel universes. You take issue with the fact that collectively we're more willing to buy into that than the prospect of extraterrestrial.
Well, so that goes back to the issue of many people in academia trying to show that they are smart rather than understand nature, because there is a whole community that dominates theoretical physics over the past half a century. They are called string theorists. And they don't have any experimental evidence to support the ideas that they're exploring. They're doing mathematical gymnastics, and it doesn't bother them. They have been operating for 50 years, and they don't anticipate that during their lifetime there would be an experiment that will test any prediction that they make. And to me, that betrays the idea that science is a learning experience, because you can show that you're clever, but you know, without getting feedback from reality, you may live in a virtual universe. I mean, it's just like putting goggles on your head and living in the metaverse. I mean, you can be happy that you live next to celebrities. The only problem is not the reality that we all share. It's like being high on drugs. You know, you can feel good about yourself, but the point of physics is to understand the physical reality, or in my case, to understand whether we have a partner, not to have an opinion.
So why do you see this as the feedback that this is not just a comet, that this looks more like that?
So this object, I mean, this is an artist's illustration, but the object was the first one to be discovered from outside the solar system. And we didn't have an image of it, but as it was tumbling every 8 hours, its brightness changed by a factor of 10. So the amount of sunlight that it reflected changed by a factor of 10. So that means that the area that the object had on the sky changed. So just imagine a piece of paper tumbling in the wind. You know, it really needs to be quite flat and elongated in order for the amount of area that you see to change by a factor of 10 as it's tumbling. And that meant it has a very extreme shape. And most likely the shape was flat based on the analysis of the variation of reflected sunlight. So, you know, that to me was a very unusual realization because rocks are not flat and they are not 10 times longer than they are wide often. And then the object was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force without showing any sign of evaporation. There was no cometary tail of dust.
Like it took a sudden burst?
Usually you get the rocket effect when a comet is losing mass and just like a jet plane or a rocket.
Sort of off gases, I guess, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But there was no evidence for dust or gas around this object. So I suggested it must be the sunlight that is reflected off it that is pushing it. And actually, a couple of years later, there was another object found by the same telescope in Hawaii, and it was pushed away from the sun by reflecting sunlight. And the astronomers realized, actually, that one is a rocket booster that NASA launched in 1966, floating in space, and they just discovered it. And it had thin walls. So here you have it, a technological object that we produced, sharing the qualitative behavior of Oumuamua. And I just raised it as a possibility. I didn't say it must be the case. And so my scientific paper was accepted for publication. I got a lot of support from other scientists until the public, until the media started paying a lot of attention to it. And then, because of that attention, I started getting pushback. And so, for example, I'm teaching a class about electromagnetism in astrophysics right now, and a week ago, I asked the students, I said, what is the strongest force in academia? And I said, it's not electromagnetism, it's not gravity, it's jealousy. Unfortunately.
That is a very dangerous thing, jealousy.
But the public cares a lot about this question, and science should attend to the public's interest. And this is the biggest question that will have the biggest impact on society if we find a partner in our cosmic neighborhood. And so I think it's just irresponsible to ignore this question. We invest billions of dollars in the search for most of the matter in the universe. We don't know what 85% of the matter is. We call it dark matter. And we still don't know after 90 years of looking around. And I say we should invest billions of dollars in the search for technological signatures or relics from other civilizations, because that will be more impactful on the future of humanity.
And so what are we doing now? Up till this point, we've just basically been listening, assuming that we're going to get radio signals. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's waiting for radio signals is like waiting for a phone call at home. Nobody may call you when you're listening. And I mean, these signals propagate at the speed of light. If you don't catch them at the right time, they just... and maybe they arrived 1 million years ago. We were not around to detect them then. A much better approach, in my opinion, is searching for packages in your backyard. Because even if the sender is dead, they could still be there. And we just didn't do that until the last decade. And that's the frontier that I'm trying to promote with the Galileo project that I'm leading at Harvard. We have an observatory, a new observatory that surveys the sky. This is the observatory, and we look at the sky, the entire sky, in the infrared, optical, radio, and audio. And we are about to release a scientific paper that details the results that we obtained for 500,000 objects over the past few months that we looked at. But in addition, I'm also looking for objects that collided with Earth and appeared as meteors that were moving so fast that were unbound to the sun's gravity. So they came from outside the solar system. And we discovered such an object from 2014.
And that's the definition of interstellar, yes?
Yeah, interstellar is simply an object moving too fast for the sun's gravity so that it cannot be bound.
What is that speed, just for
Oh,
kicks?
okay. So the Earth moves around the sun at 30 kilometers per second.
Okay.
That's the speed by which the Earth circles the sun. If you increase that speed by square root of 2, meaning 42 kilometers per second instead of 30, the Earth would fly out of the solar system.
Wow.
Another way to do it is if you imagine the sun losing mass. At some point, the Earth will not be bound by gravity because the sun's gravity depends on its mass. I mean, you can think of gravity, I mean, Einstein thought about it as the curvature of space and time. So just think about a trampoline that has, you put a bowling ball at the middle of the trampoline, the rubber bends, and you send a marble around the center and it moves in a circle in this curved rubber around the bowling ball. If you were to remove the bowling ball and let the marble give it the same speed, it will just move in a straight line. That's what would happen to the Earth if the sun disappeared. So the point is that if an object moves fast enough, it escapes the sun.
Got
it. There was a meteor in 2014 that we discovered with my student, and then the US Space Command confirmed that it's interstellar in origin, and I led an expedition to the Pacific Ocean in June 2023, about a little more than a year ago, and we recovered materials from the bottom of the ocean that is roughly a mile deep, over a region that was about 7 miles in size, and I brought the material back here to Harvard University, and we studied it over the past year, and by now we published a paper that was peer-reviewed where we identified 10% of the material as molten droplets that had a chemical composition different from solar system materials. So we have some preliminary evidence that we found material that was never seen before in the solar system. But what we want is to go again in summer 2025, and this expedition will cost $6.5 million. The first one was $1.5 million. And I'm currently seeking the funding for that. And we will use a robot, place it on the ocean floor, and with a video feed so that we can pick up bigger pieces. Because if we find bigger pieces of this meteor, it will tell us the nature, whether it was a Voyager-like meteor, artificially made, or whether it was natural, just a rock. And if it was technological in origin and we find a big piece and it has buttons on it, the question is, should we press a button?
What I wonder is if you thought there was another one of these interstellar, these visitors like Oumuamua,
Right.
Are we any better prepared to deal with that now than we did in 2017, where it was here and then it was gone?
Yeah, now we are alert to the possibility that it might be something very different than the rocks that we are familiar with. Back then, the astronomers said, "Oh, it's just a rock. Let's take a few observations of it," and that was pretty much it. And we missed an opportunity to get much better data. And now we also have the Webb telescope that is 1 million miles away from Earth. So we will have two eyes, one on Earth, a telescope on Earth looking at it, and then the Webb telescope looking at it from a different direction, so we can pinpoint the three-dimensional trajectory of the object. And from that, we can learn whether it has any propulsion, in addition to the force of gravity acting on it. So we will learn much more. But if you ask, some people ask, is humanity prepared to the message that we might not be alone? And I say, it's completely irrelevant. Humanity, we were not ready for the message that we are not at the center of the universe. And, obviously, Nicolaus Copernicus, he realized this. He was a priest, and he had a difficult time getting his book out, and it was banned by the church until the 19th century. I was actually invited to Poland to celebrate 550 years for the birth of Copernicus, and I gave a talk about the next Copernican revolution, which would be us recognizing not only that we are not at the physical center of the universe, but also not at the intellectual center of the universe. And Galileo Galilei was put in house arrest after Copernicus. The Vatican, by the way, admitted that Galileo was right in 1992. That was 20 years after humans landed on the moon.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a good amount of time. Well, so if you had a blank check to do all the research that you'd like to do with the Galileo project and then some, what do you suppose we might find and when?
Well, if I had billions of dollars instead of millions of dollars, that's a factor of 1,000. I think within the coming decade, we should be able to definitely figure out whether among the rocks that come close to Earth from interstellar space, there are any technological, I call it space trash. These are objects like Voyager, Pioneer, New Horizon. When they will exit the solar system, maybe in 10,000 years, they would leave the outskirts of the Oort cloud of the solar system. At that point, they will not be functional anymore. So we will just pollute interstellar space with trash, just like plastics in the ocean. They keep accumulating over time. So all the civilizations that existed before us polluted interstellar space, and we can find their trash. And their trash will be our treasure.
So your bet is that we will find evidence of technology?
I think so. I think the main reason we haven't found anything is because we didn't search. And, it's very easy for people like Elon Musk to argue, I haven't seen any evidence. Of course, you didn't search. I mean, if, the satellites that Elon Musk puts around the Earth, they could not see the Higgs boson. We invested $10 billion in the Large Hadron Collider in order to find the Higgs boson. We invested $10 billion in the Webb telescope to find the first galaxies. you have to build special instruments that would allow you to be much more sensitive to the type of things you are seeking. You can't just say, oh, nothing came here. Enrico Fermi, an Italian scientist that won the Nobel Prize, he sat at lunch in Los Alamos, 1951, and said, where is everybody? They were talking about extraterrestrials. And he said, well, I don't see any evidence. But of course, this is a question that every lonely person asks. Where is everybody? I don't have a partner because where is everybody? And what you tell such a person is, you need to seek a partner. You need to go to dating sites. You need to leave your home. At the very least, you need to look through your windows, the windows of your home. You can't just be so pretentious to argue that you're so attractive that they will come to you, which is what Enrico Fermi said.
But what do you think about what I've heard Patricia say, which is that aliens and animals alike are smart to be afraid of us because we have such a violent
Listen,
disposition?
I'm just saying they're watching. They got this huge situation room on the mothership, and I know you haven't gotten to that part yet. And they're watching CNN and Fox and everything else. And they're going, we're not letting them see us. Are you cray-cray?
Yeah.
No. I would, So, but all seriousness, if you're dealing with a supreme intelligence, it's like when we go into certain areas, like in the jungle or in North Carolina where there are rattlesnakes sometimes in the backyard, you're careful where you go because you don't want to run into one of these things. Yeah. Why do you think, now we didn't talk about Bigfoot. That's another one you're interested in, I'm sure. He's pretty smart to keep his distance too, you see. Yep.
Yeah, if they are truly intelligent, they will avoid us. That's clear.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have some questions from the audience here. This one, using forensic science in story feels like fixed certain logic. Introducing UAPs into the conversation feels like welcoming uncertainty into a view of the world. Does introducing astrophysics into writing reflect a shift in perspective on the world for Patricia?
Well, you know what? It reminds me of what you asked a few minutes ago about how do you keep your sense of wonder? Because if you don't have that, you don't ask questions and you don't really pursue something anymore. And so by introducing this whole subject of what happens if Scarpetta gets a phone call, Lucy's on the way to pick her up in the helicopter, and yeah, but there's a little problem. It looks like this person's been dropped out of the sky. A UAP was picked up on multiple sensors. And there's a crop circle around him of flower petals from the trees. And also, looks like the skin might have been exposed to some kind of radiation. So, okay, Scarpetta's going to have to deal with this. And this all started with, I've been seeing a lot in the news about UAPs, and way back in 2017 when I started doing a lot of NASA research, and I was reading about the Oumuamua and all of that, and I've just gotten more and more of a sense of wonder of what are people seeing out there? And these whistleblowers, what are they talking about? Was Roswell real? I mean, I'm one of these, I'm fascinated because if it was, I want to know about that. If there's, so I thought, how do I put that into a story without turning it into science fiction? Because I don't write science fiction, and you'll be happy to know that that is not science fiction. Everything in there is within the realm of possibility. It doesn't mean it exists, but it's within the realm of possibility. So that's how I try to keep on with what I do. I have to have something that fills me full of far more questions than answers. And then I go after it, whether it's Jack the Ripper or a flying saucer maybe.
Here's another one. What will be weirder about what exists beyond our knowledge today, truth or fiction?
Well, what is possible is vast. Nature is one realization of what is possible. Okay, so if you let your imagination run wild, then there are so many things that are possible. And of course, that's the idea of the metaverse, that you can imagine some virtual reality that would be more satisfactory, that will flatter your ego, that will give you pleasure. the reality that we all share is not always pleasurable. In fact, most of the time it's disturbing. And if you are committed to improving the world, you have to accept to compromise with the one reality that we all share. And, that's not easy. But on the other hand, it's the only way that you can make the world better or adapt to it. And for example, a lot of people talk about global warming, climate change. And that makes them unhappy about the current situation. But what not many people talk about is how to adapt to it. So suppose it continues, suppose you can't change the policy of some nations to make the world avoid this, this global climate change. We will need to adapt to it. Yep. That's not being done because people don't like to think about the reality. They always want to imagine something better than what we face. And it's really important when you deal with the universe at large, not to imagine that it's all about us. And people often think that even if aliens come here, it's because they find us interesting. They want to help us. They want to prevent a nuclear war, and I think they don't really care about us. I mean, it's just like a biker passing and seeing ants on the pavement. I mean, they started their journey maybe billions of years ago, at least millions of years ago. We were not around. We were indistinguishable from nature. If they come here, it's not because of us. We keep insisting that we play an important role in this cosmic play when we are not at the center of stage.
Did you say cosmic play? Like cosplay?
Yeah. Cosmic, not comic.
Cosplay. It's like a play on cosplay. Cosmic play.
Well, the way I see it is, there is a stage, that's the universe, and we play a role on that stage, and unfortunately we don't do very well, but we just came to exist only over the past few million years, the human species, and that's one part in 10,000 of cosmic history. That's really late. And, we might want to seek someone else that was around for much longer and knows what the play is about.
Are you worried, though, this is another question, are you worried that an extraterrestrial civilization would be hostile to humans?
No. Stephen Hawking, for example, argued a decade ago that we should be really careful because there might be predators out there. And I think they don't really care about us. We can benefit from learning their technologies. I see it as a positive experience that is enriching for us, and I don't think they really care about us. They are not trying to do anything to us. If you think about what we are doing here on Earth, obviously, if you go to a restaurant, you find on the menu animals that we regard as less intelligent than we are, so we eat them. We eat fish, we eat chicken, and that's what what led Stephen Hawking to worry that if something more intelligent than us visits us and they're not impressed, they might put us in their soup. But I don't think they really care about us.
Does it worry you, Patricia?
Well, listen, I feel if there is something that's been visiting us or is within range, shall we say, if they wanted to do something bad to us, they could do that a long time ago.
Yes.
I mean, we're no match for a superior intellect, like the likes of what we're probably talking about. So I think that the things that we accuse extraterrestrials of perhaps doing to us is in fact what we do to others. We are projecting our own nasty human nature onto them. We're the ones that go around butchering animals and people and doing all, I'm going to shoot my laser pointer at the airplane going by. That's real smart. What a great idea. Or let's get a flamethrower. I mean, they're not who I'm worried about. I'm worried about us. And maybe they will let themselves be known to us sooner if we start behaving better.
Yeah, it's like going on a date and looking at the mirror first to imagine what your date, the partner, might be like. That's not a good practice. It's much better to go on a date, not to expect anything, and listen to the other side first. Mm-hmm. And we do the same thing with AI, artificial intelligence, because a lot of people are worried and they claim that AI exhibits all kinds of negative traits, and I see it right now as a digital mirror. When you see it misbehaving, it's because it reflects what we do. When you train it on the internet, that's not a very good educational material for the, it's just like taking your kids to dark corners in the street and allowing them to learn everything that happens there. I mean, we all know that education is all about filtering the information that your kids absorb. And we haven't done that with AI. We train them on junk food, on the internet. And now we realize, well, we have to be more careful. But another thing that happened was in December last year, there was a claim that ChatGPT becomes dumber. And someone suggested that it's because it interacted with people for several months.
What are your thoughts on AI, Patricia?
But AI?
Yeah, do you have any fear that we'll become
look,
enslaved?
First of all, that genie is not going to go back in the bottle. I mean, AI, it's not something that's going to happen. It already is happening. I mean, I first talked about AI in the mid-'90s when I wrote the book called The Body Farm, based on what you just were showing a little while ago. And so what we have to do is learn to live with it. What I think is really fascinating about artificial intelligence, which may not be the right name for it anyway, AI, is when you're talking about extraterrestrial matters. I often wonder if they ever did try to communicate with us, might they do it through AI? Because working through some kind of computer or electronic, I have a NASA friend, and she's about as nerdy as an engineer as you'd ever meet, so it's not like her to say fanciful things. But she said, I sometimes think that some of the greatest inventions and the things that scientists come up with, it's like it's given to us from somewhere else. Like E equals MC squared, maybe, something that is really earth-changing. And so that's one of the reasons I'm fascinated by it, because it might open up communication in ways that we've never anticipated with maybe something beyond us, as weird as that may sound.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about the alignment problem of how to align AI with humans. I would let some AI explore things that are better than humans, become superhuman, and this could be inspiring to us. Another thing is that it can offer a new plot for one of your future books, which is a crime scene in which an AI system that is demonstrated superhuman intelligence was unplugged from the electric power, and that's like pulling the trigger on a person, in a way. It was being killed, and the question is who did it. And
Scarpetta will find out. She'll come to the rescue if artificial intelligence if the plug gets pulled. But I think that we're so much better off if we can try to understand what's coming down the road instead of being afraid of it. And we live in a world that's increasingly fear-driven. And it's like you talk about, you can't discover anything new if you don't take risks. And if you're constantly fear-driven, you won't try that new job, you won't try that new this or that, you won't write the book, believe me, I know. You won't try to prove a hypothesis that keeps you up at night because you're so curious. I mean, this is what we need to not be as afraid of something as we should try to understand it and maybe utilize it.
Yeah, AI is made of silicon. I mean, the chips that are used very different from the human brain. It's also using gigawatts of power, where the human brain is using just 12 watts.
Yeah, light up a 12-watt light bulb and then see if you still feel so good about yourself.
So, a century ago, there was a philosopher named Martin Buber, and he talked about actually 3 types of interactions. I-object, I mean the interaction of a human with an object, the interaction of a human with another human, and the interaction of a human with God. And of course, there were no computers back then. If he were alive today, he would have he should have added the additional type of interactions, a human AI interaction, an AI interaction, because they might interact among themselves. And I would add terrestrial AI with extraterrestrial AI, because they might feel more kinship to extraterrestrial visitors than to us, if both of them are made of silicon.
Well, this has been terrific. Thank you so much to Patricia Cornwell and Dr. Avi Loeb.
Thank you.